looks like most of us are here, so we'll get started. Okay. So I'll call the meeting of the Recode Rowlett committee to assemble here, and I'm going to dispense of the reading of a lot of the upward parts because we're not going to have an executive session or anything, so we'll just go from the call to order to citizens input, and I don't see anybody here that isn't already staff on the committee, so we'll dispense of that. Consent agenda. The only thing on the consent agenda is the approving of the minutes of September 9, 2025. Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes of the minutes from the last meeting, September 9, 2025? Anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none?
Well, I've got one question.
Sure.
So we discussed updating the definition of flex space, but was it ever updated? Because I don't think that's reflected.
I think John did it later to actually looking at those, all of them.
Uses dimensional standards?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? If not, take a motion to accept the minutes as printed.
I'll move to accept.
I'll second it.
A move and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye or show hands. Any opposed? All right. And now we move on to individual considerations, resuming of the zoning code discussions on residential C1 and O1 zoning districts. Mr. Hall, it's yours.
Should be M1, M2.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at
That's those minutes from last
time. Sorry.
Sounds good. That's okay. So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to stay in the realm of our non-residential zoning districts and kind of look at some characteristics, specifically focusing on M1 and M2 zoning districts. We have some recommendations in terms of looking at what those districts are today versus what they were when we initially started the code and what many cities have kind of progressed to. As you all know, when it comes to manufacturing, a lot of our manufacturing in the United States is not happening in the United States. A lot of it is being imported from other countries because we moved from a agricultural to an industrial nation, from an industrial nation now to a service nation. The service industry is the predominant type of industry for the United States. And in doing so, it's important to kind of look at kind of what our current zoning districts are for this manufacturing / industrial. We're going to offer you some illustrations, and interestingly enough, it just kind of played out like this. Later in the planning and zoning meeting, one of the plats we're going to be considering is for a building that was initially permitted. It's going in for a replat. So we get a chance to kind of look at how the current dimensions and design standards are working. We have some illustrations. You've probably experienced this construction that's going up along Lakeview Parkway, and you're probably interested in what it is. So we'll have kind of a real life discussion on the project. And then we'll briefly discuss the overlay district for industrial. We have an industrial overlay zone. And this is meant to be on top of our manufacturing districts. And then we'll talk briefly about the joint meeting for the Recode presentation that the mayor is scheduled for next Tuesday. So any questions before we get into the agenda? No questions? All right. So here's some zoning considerations that I think are going to be helpful in guiding this discussion, this conversation related to these industrial manufacturing types of uses. As we embark on this task, one of the things that I'm going to ask you to consider are that industrial uses are the most intense and context sensitive uses to consider. So why do I say that? Normally when we get complaints from our lovely residents, and it's related to either a business, but more specifically if it's an industrial type of business, there's always the issue of noise, odor, fumes that may be coming. And this is the traditional manufacturing that we used to see in the 40s and 50s. But sometimes we see it now, depending upon the location of residential, or maybe even a park, you can't really enjoy that quality of life factor because of the strategic location of that industrial use as compared to where it is in proximity to residential and outdoor amenity areas. So think through this as the most intense and context sensitive type of use to consider in all of our zoning districts. One critical element that what we know is true for these types of zoning districts, there has to be good proximity to infrastructure. So by and large, infrastructure that already exists or as a part of the overall development, the applicant is proposing to upgrade and enhance the infrastructure. Why is that? Because with many of these large industrial buildings, these manufacturing facilities, there's a great deal of tractor trailer activity. We may also see, around the clock, 3 shifts, where people are coming in and out. And so those of us that sleep during normal hours, we want the peace and enjoyment of not being woken up by loud, alarms that are going off, people honking their horns, or just the presence of trucks going in and out of those businesses. So proximity to infrastructure is critical. But, from a land use perspective, applying appropriate buffers to mitigate those residential conflicts, so kind of what I talked about before, how do we ensure that if we are to allow some of these types of developments, what type of buffers are appropriate distance-wise to ensure that it will not compromise residents' quality of life? And then kind of coupled with that, consider distancing and placement of buildings for the built environment. So a lot of times we don't talk about the existing built environment. Part of this task is to look at these different types of zoning districts, how we can reimagine them, understanding that we have, a fairly built out city. But if we get some new redevelopment in way of industrial manufacturing facilities, how can we consider the placement of those buildings, the distances of those buildings in relation to our already built environment? And then this is something that you're going to see play out today in an actual development project that's underway, is understanding restricting planned developments to PDs to get around the different types of design criteria that you might see in industrial zoning. And you'll see why I put this in here, because we're going to talk about a project that's currently underway now in the city. And it was done basically through a planned development. But as we dug a little bit more into it, there is an underlying zoning district for industrial, and then potentially there could be some additional criteria on top of it based upon its proximity to the industrial overlay. We don't think it's actually in the overlay, but very close to the boundaries of it.
Could you define overlay district for us?
Yes. So an overlay is a specific land use designation on top of what is already an existing zoning district. So it is meant to apply additional standards above and beyond the typical design criteria that we've been covering and the dimensional standards we're covering. So above and beyond setbacks, it might provide some greater design elements related to height restriction, placement of buildings, the type of landscaping. So it's above and beyond what is required in your typical zoning district. Consider an additional layer of enforcement.
And when is that established? How is that established?
It can be established at any time. Typically, before we create our overlay district, a great deal of research is conducted, analysis is conducted by staff. We will probably make a recommendation for the hearing bodies. In this case, it'll be planning and zoning and city council. Because of the sheer nature of this area, maybe there's an additional overlay district to kind of protect the unique aspect of this area, for instance. So we have one. There's an overlay district. It's called industrial overlay. And according to the ordinance, and we'll pull it up in a minute, it is everything that is south of 66 or 150 feet.
Everything,
Everything.
the whole 66.
Yes. And here's where we just found this out. We were comparing that definition, and before we had this meeting, I had a conversation with the city attorney because I wanted to make sure I was reading this right. And so in 2012, City Council authorized an ordinance where we added the industrial overlay to the Rowlett Development Code. In that, it recognized the traditional industrial uses that we have, primarily what I call Western Rowlett, but as we know, there are also some industrial types of uses right here in downtown. But it was put in place to kind of protect the area, and particularly on the western side, the benefit that they have over there are no residential units in proximity. Everything in that area, with the exception of some commercial development along Lakeview Parkway, everything is industrial in nature. A lot of, automotive repair, tire shops, things of that nature. Some crafts and specialty types of areas, but it's some type of industrial type of use. But when we look at our zoning map, the zoning map only located the western portion of the city. But when you look at the definition, and this is what I got clarification on from the city attorney, it indicates the entire length from city limit to city limit that is south of 66 for the first 150 feet is within this overlay district. So that's a correction that we're gonna have to make in our zoning map, because we don't recognize that in Chile. And that was new to us, that was new to staff, that was new, but it's the way in which, how the ordinance is written. So finally, one other zoning consideration for these types of uses, and this is gonna be, again, critical for the example we're gonna show tonight. If the ultimate user is not identified, meaning if you're building a manufacturing or warehouse, industrial type of building, we get a lot of these shell buildings, requiring additional land use review before issuing building permits. And the reason why is, as we go through this exercise, we'll talk through different types of even industrial uses, as we kind of talk through with commercial uses. Different types of industrial uses will have different demands for parking. But if we entitle the building through a shell application, which we then lay out all the parking, and we find that one potential user requires more parking, in the case of our existing building that's being erected now, they're landlocked. So that creates a situation where they're by default, they may have to try and get a variance. But technically a variance should be only granted for, not for hardship, but for size, shape, or topography. Something in the landscape that prevents you from having full utilization of the land. You got creek running in the middle, right?
Big building that's sitting in the middle of your lot.
Or a creek in the middle of the land, right? So,
But you also should consider items such as, for instance, in Irving, the largest user of water
yes,
is Kroger, for their beverage plant.
yeah,
So that's an infrastructure matter that should be considered
Yes.
before you grant a permit
right.
to build, if it's going to take an inordinate amount of water that is a resource we might be strapped with.
Correct. And I can tell you as a planner, I don't think that we would even think about that as a part of the land use process, but it is something to kind of consider.
But we also get these signed off by the city engineer and things of that nature, so
Right.
someone should be coming at that.
Right. So it's one of those situations where we want to encourage development, but to the best of our ability, it is incumbent upon us to try and drill down with the developer as much as possible who is ultimately going to be the end user of that building, because then we can really get to what are the required design standards, parking, landscaping, setbacks, all of those things are going to come. Because imagine if you were, we're going to see in an illustration shortly, if you were a shell building and now it's gonna be heavy warehouse, a lot of truck traffic, you may not have the infrastructure in place to accommodate that. And it's a little too late after the building has been erected. So we're gonna kind of go through a live example of what we're dealing with now. Okay, so you guys remember this zoning district index? We're on, if we look at our current Rowlett Development Code, we call them M1 and M2. Light manufacturing, got 20 plus properties, most are near the Dart station. And then M2, which is general manufacturing, meaning it's more intense manufacturing types of activities. It is also near Dart, but we have a couple other locations throughout the city. I also highlighted for you, because you've been noticing a trend in the city, where some of the industrial manufacturing developments have come in not using our set M1 and M2 zoning, they're coming in as an ED. And they're doing that more so than not. Even though, as you can see in the packet, there are pretty flexible development standards and design guidelines for M1 and M2, right? So it talks about, really very little setback based upon the handout we gave out. Very little setback and, great flexibility in terms of what you're designing in the current Rowlett Development Code.
Are these setbacks here, the current code?
Yes, so I think in when your packet you received the current and the current and the proposed. And then again, the industrial overlay, and we have properties that are just south of 66.
Have we had copies, I don't have any copy of this particular zoning district. I've got a different one, but it's.
Okay. Do we have extra copies? Do we print out extra
Do you have
copies
copies of this particular one right here?
This slide? No.
for this one?
Yeah, that particular slide right there.
Yeah, we can get you copies of this one.
Yeah.
We have it from our previous meeting, but yes.
Yeah,
But you do have it for the M1, M2, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I've got that one, I don't have.
Okay. Yeah, we can get you copies of that. So that's what we're gonna focus on today, this industrial / manufacturing zoning district. So again, right now we have two, M1, M2, and then we have the overlay districts of IO. And then I just highlighted planned development because we have a number of manufacturing and industrial projects that went the route of a PD with the underlining zoning of M1 or M2. But they did that to kind of go around some of the development things to create their own. And it just kind of created.
Should we consider renaming because we're not in a manufacturing environment?
Yes. I mean, that's gonna be, you're jumping the gun, but that's okay. No, it's fine. It's great. It's great. That is a very good point. And that's one of the recommendations we're gonna make. So just for visual purposes, we pulled up a couple of illustrations to show you kind of where these zoning districts are. So south of Lakeview Parkway, so we have some M2 and the slide to the left, and then some M1. And then in this slide, which is further down Rowlett Road, we have an M2 area. And we just recently got a project for this. We just got a project today where someone is proposing something. So we'll have to discuss it as a staff later on. So, how many of you all have recently driven down Lakeview Parkway?
Yeah.
And I think I've gotten a couple calls for this,
That's what
right?
I'm talking about. Yeah.
So along Lakeview Parkway, right before you get to Rowlett Road, traveling east, I always get my directions right. If you're traveling east, it'll be on the south side. There is a large building being constructed, and I had to ask staff, kind of what this was. So this building is approximately 70,000 square feet. It was approved through a PD with a underlying zoning district of C2. Not M1, but C2. So then when we looked specifically at, and I've asked Michael to help me with this, he's gonna pull up kind of generally what was approved with the PD. They acknowledged some light industrial activity, and they acknowledged some warehousing, some distribution type of activity. And so we went back to the use table and we noticed that for an underlying zoning district of C2, none of those activities are permitted. So I had to call the city attorney again and I'm like, I have a problem. We have a PD that has all of these requirements, all of the permitted uses, but the underlying zoning district is C2, but none of what they're proposing is actually permitted in C2. And so I said, I think you're gonna tell me that the PD overrides what it is, what is actually preferred in C2. So when I say, you know, sometimes I think, just in general, developers are trying to get creative in their way, but for intents and purposes of this meeting, I wanted to be able to describe to you all what I thought this was. So I went over, we took some photos. First of all, you can see kind of the height difference. It's the tallest thing, particularly on this end of 66 that we've seen. Very visible building.
Is it spec?
Yes, it's a shell building.
Actually, I was pretty darn surprised at how invisible it is from 66. I mean, you can barely see the top of the roof line. Now, you're way across the street,
Right.
However,
you know, looking right in between two buildings, but if you're traveling 66, it's really hard to see that.
however, if you're at Cat Creek with your grandkids,
Yeah.
there it is, right there.
Or in public.
It is like,
Oh, what's that? And then on the left side, what are those two buildings in front of us?
So this is the bronze ice cream spot.
The bond, okay.
Yeah, and then the next one is, yes.
Yeah. Happy birthday.
Hubbard's and Hat
Right.
Creek.
And when I took this picture, I was standing on the north side of 66, right next to, what was there, Salad's. Yeah, I was right there.
This is kind of interesting because I remember when this came up and just mentally as you were laying it out because it ties in with everything on Century and all that. And I don't know that I ever really, I don't know that I made that height connection from what it would be like 66 because it seemed to tie in with the rest of that Century Industrial District, other than I know they had to put an extra wide drive in there for fire trucks and others now, so, yeah.
So you see the elevation, and what I wanted Michael to help me with on here is, the height of the building is approximately 42 feet.
42 feet.
Now,
Is it conditioned space? Will it be conditioned space?
It would be.
And is there a parapet to cover the air conditioning?
Yeah, there's a parapet
There.
along there, yes.
So, before he gets into that, on PNC, we talked to the developer, we did drill down. There's supposed to be, John, what, 4 places, as I recall?
Something like that.
And it is a spec building, because they did not have anybody sign it at the time.
right,
But they featured, what they were going after is somebody that could warehouse tiles and have a showroom, and one part of it, storage of the tiles, and another, have somebody, maybe a drywall, place, for another one of the buildings. Yeah, but that's what they wanted to do with the building, and that's what they told us.
How much would be conditioned space? Like, of the 68,000, how much would be office?
It's going to be determined by parking.
Okay. So what's the parking ratio?
Let me look and see how many parking spaces they've got.
and see, while we're talking this through, we're talking through kind of some of the complexities of when we allow a developer to go through a PD route, and they've not determined the end user, but they have to put everything in place, parking, landscaping, you know, depending upon who's gonna come in, and you may then find yourself not having enough parking.
This is the point I'm trying to make, is that if you have 5,000 square feet of office space,
Right.
typically the ratio is 4 per 1,000. But if you have that 5,000 that I just made up undefined, then how do you know what you're gonna require for parking? And if there isn't sufficient parking, then you created an albatross. And it's not a good taxable revenue producing product if it's not leasable.
So these are some additional pictures that I took at the site before the meeting. So there is an alley that kind of separates the commercial activities from the industrial activities. But it's such a large building. So now what I recall is this alley is not proposed to be improved. It's crossed and
And it's not, it's a piece.
Yeah,
right.
it's been bad for you. And is all
We
of
asked
this,
them if they would approve it for us, you know, they put it in the building, they said no.
and is that all shipping and receiving on one end of the warehouse?
Yes,
Yep. So there's
What's the
access.
clear height on it?
42-foot clear height, interior ceiling height is 32 feet, so there's about 10 foot of parapet all the way around.
But now, we did get clarification earlier. This is not their main point of access to the building.
Right.
There is a cul-de-sac behind the shopping center off of Rowlett
oh, no,
where
no,
they're going to
their
get
main point
access.
of access is supposed to be right there, just before your, telephone pole.
It's
Lot
Sprouts.
66.
Okay.
So that driveway. So this.
Sprouts Drive extends not only from 66 to Sprouts Market, but it extends on the other side, right down the side of Aspen. And that's where the trucks are supposed to go in and out, is up to the traffic light.
And in fact, the function of the driveway on the, would be the south side of this building? Is that right? Off of the, industrial or enterprise.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, right.
Was supposed to relieve traffic on Rowlett Road, which is not a truck route, okay? Or does it have a decent left-hand turn to get onto 66? They will be rolling down through here around this building and out on Sprouts.
So the entrance is beside Brahms.
Goes between Brahms and Aspen, right there.
So,
In fact, the developer owns that egress easement.
right.
Really?
Here's the challenge with that, and we were talking about this today in our staff meeting. So if this is the entrance here, you see they have parking here?
Yeah.
No curb, obviously, just parking for the adjacent buildings here, and then parking on this other side. Now, I
They've
believe
got
here
curb
there's a
stops,
curb.
you know.
And then this would be the driveway into the building.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
It doesn't have, it has the concrete stops on
Curb
Brahms.
stops,
Right. So this is where we were thinking that the entrance is gonna be, this
No.
cul-de-sac.
No, in fact, one of the big comments was about how, just to the bottom right-hand side of your screen,
Yeah.
right now, scroll up, I forget the name of that company. But they have so much truck traffic, a lot of times they're blocking any movement on Enterprise Drive. And
This one
so,
or this one here?
over to the right bottom, what is that, A and Z? Z, A and?
A Surface Technologies?
Right, AZZ Surface Technologies. That, this would provide some relief to that because they'd be able to use that driveway around, what you see here is plan bottom and left to
Right.
get out on the, 66. And you read that PD, there is a limitation on the number of 18-wheelers that can come in and out during the day.
And that was part of the PD, by the way. That was-
And that was limited number of 18-wheelers for the project that was going in without considering all the others, AZ and Z, you know, but it's fairly light traffic, actually.
I just wanted to highlight this just to kind of show you as we're going through this exercise. sometimes we have these unintended consequences. It's probably gonna generate a lot of jobs, but there is some uncertainty in terms of after it's built, you know, is the end user gonna come in and then demand more parking? Well, they're kind of landlocked, so I don't know how they're gonna get it. The building is already erected, and then I can tell you for certainty,
Parking warehouse.
depending upon their traffic, they're gonna have problems with going, if this is gonna be a main point of entrance, they're gonna have problems coming in. This driveway is at best 15 feet, unimproved.
But they're not supposed to come in there.
Okay.
It's shift, go to the east.
Is it
Up the east side of the property, almost straight out 66.
So is it this Enterprise Drive,
Yes,
right, where the cul-de-sac is?
that's correct.
Sprouts Drive is,
Yeah, it's gonna go
Sprouts
about
Drive
60.
This is Sprouts Drive here.
yeah, that is their primary ingress and egress point.
What's the orientation of the building, Harry? Where your cursor is?
It faces the
This-
east.
It's like this.
This side of the building, okay, if you look, this side of the building up against the creek is where the loading docks are.
Okay, so you're correct. That's where the truck is gonna come in.
Yeah.
They can't get to it from the other.
Yeah,
Oh,
and Enterprise, the people
Okay.
on Enterprise and that can actually go through the southern portion and then right out.
The trucks have to come through Bronx.
There is a fire lane all the way around the building. The trucks can get out on Enterprise.
Yeah, there's a fire lane, but I can tell you the building is set back no more than 30 feet from the alley.
From
It's-
30 feet from, you're right, but they're actually coming in at the back of the building. Okay, so they're not gonna be anywhere on that alleyway up there.
But again, I just wanted to show this illustration because I was trying to understand, you know, in the context of looking at this,
They're gonna be crossing that out.
right, crossing that alley, entering here. Landscaping, we saw on the plan that's gonna go back here, but to Michael's point, there's a fire lane all the way around the building in the back. So it's tight, it's big and it's tight, and it's landlocked. Okay, let's move on to another example. One that you all are most familiar with. Okay, so that's that example. So when we talk about West Rowlett further over, these are these small, manufacturing warehouse, industrial types of buildings, tag shops. Yep, all of these specialty areas here. So this entire area here, almost to our city boundaries on the west side. Yeah, it's kind of what we're talking about.
Some of that, there it crosses the exit road,
Yes.
and it's along both sides of the exit up to 66.
Right.
I think Centennial still owns that property, John.
It's not pretty, but it's no stranger to hard work.
Okay, so, and incidentally, we didn't mention this. So we thought we kind of had, it's already constructed. So staff and I, before this meeting, we did the measurements. This building is right outside of the industrial overlay. So the industrial overlay, if you're curious, it has a height limitation of 36 feet.
It's just.
So that's the reason why Bronx is only one story.
Well, but see, it's not, that's only for industrial types of uses, right? So, right, but see, that's commercial, so that would be fine. This building is not commercial, and so I was thinking, okay, well, why is it 42 feet? We measured it, Brahms doorway is 150 feet from the, but the intent of that was to make sure that no industrial building, if it was built along 66, would have a height
Superimposed.
that would be so imposing that it would take away from the attractiveness of 66. So we couldn't get them there.
So, but let's let's stop there and think for a second, because it got turned down at city council level only because of some other reason, basically. But across from Centennial Steel, they own all that property, that is fine for heavy industrial. And there's two warehouse buildings that they wanted to build, not Centennial, but a developer wanted to build across from QT back toward Garland. And
On the north side of 66.
on the south side.
South
of
side,
66.
yeah, six between QT and the.
And it was gonna be,
Yes.
it would have been every bit as tall as this one right here.
And we verified that the industrial overlay is the most restricted land use tool that we have. So it says in our ordinance, based upon this 2012 ordinance that was adopted, that if there are conflicting development standards, design criteria, height, that the industrial overlay guidelines prevail over any and everything else. So even if they would have put it in the PD, and this is what they did in their PD, I think the height was 96 feet.
Yeah.
We reviewed that, 96 feet,
Wow.
right? But because it's not technically in the overlay district, we can't apply that standard. But anything that may be built in the future will have that restriction of 36 feet, if it's industrial launch. So they got out by the skin of their teeth, the skin of their teeth.
Didn't know that that overlay existed.
Yes,
That was the deal. We didn't know that
Yeah,
overlay
it's
existed.
us, but.
yeah. Well, and you probably didn't, because I'm thinking that when staff reviewed this, they only saw the overlay to be the western portion. But when we look at the applicability of the location, it specifically says all areas, not the western part of the city, but all areas that are south of 66 is located within the overlay district. And that makes sense, because again, right across from City Hall, we have some industrial uses. Those things would fall kind of into that area. We have Industrial Boulevard, right? So, you know, it just kind of makes sense. Okay, let's move on to North Shore planning area. You guys know this very well. So, the east side of the toll road. So we have the Lakeview Business District Park. We had to go to the website to get the official name. 1.76 million square feet, 160 acres business park, as you all know. So this came in as a PD as well. It has 2 zoning districts. So this portion that you see here, if I get my cursor there, you see it.
Everything that's built now.
Well, everything that you see that's green, a portion of the green there is slated for C1, some commercial use. Everything else is M1, right, Stan?
Yep.
M1. So that makes sense. And from, you know, if we go back to kind of our original definition, they have the infrastructure. They're not necessarily adjacent. There may be one house or two in somewhat proximity, but they're not necessarily in proximity.
Well,
to
and they're all
residential.
legally non-conforming.
That's true.
That's correct. That's right.
What's the height on these?
The height on this one is probably around the same,
Yeah, probably
42, 43, 44 feet.
Yep.
2 stories almost.
And a beautiful street there.
Okay. So you kind of see the difference. You know, this is in a compact environment, very tight, potential conflicts with some of the adjacent, even the adjacent commercial businesses. We don't know how this is gonna play out when we see Aspen Dental and their patients are parking there and the trucks are coming in and out, trying to get access. You know, that narrow alley in the back. And then just the overall visibility, I think from the street, you see this kind of overpowering building there, as opposed to, you know, when we look at a more suitable area where this is less imposing and it kind of fits within it creates its own theme, if you will.
Yeah, there's nothing there to compare it to.
There's nothing there to compare it to. And it reduces the potential, conflicts with the adjacent property.
They don't think so.
Right, right.
That is true.
So if there are no questions, let's go into some of the recommendations. And this is where we're gonna probably need to have a little bit more discussion on related to some of the dimension standards, some of the setbacks. So let me go over the purpose statement first. Let me make sure we have that. Right. Okay. So it's currently zoned M1, limited manufacturing. And Mr. Committee member, to your point, we're not doing manufacturing by and large anymore. So we're making a recommendation to change it to light industrial because most of what we're seeing is warehousing and distribution, even from, the Lakeview, what do we call it? The Lakeview Business District Park. Most of this is gonna be light industrial. And, the case went before P&Z where we now can acknowledge Lincoln Tech is coming in. It'll be scheduled at the next full city council meeting for their consideration. But they're asking to move into the building where the green grass is.
Yeah, right.
So that'll be on the city council's docket on October 14th, the next full council meeting.
As
So
an SUP or as a,
that was a very interesting discussion. So staff is recommending for this to change to M1 to L1, and then I'll just read the purpose statement so that we're all on the same page. So generally speaking, kind of as was outlined in the language that was sent, we're moving away from manufacturing and trying to look at more descriptive zoning districts that describe the actual activity. So the purpose of this district is to provide a wide range of industrial uses that are generally not compatible in adjacent or residential neighborhoods, and may or may not be compatible with some non-residential uses. Such uses include manufacturing, processing, assembly, research and development, and warehousing and distribution. The district also accommodates supportive services for industrial development such as office, commercial, personal and professional services, and limited retail activity. The industrial district regulations are designed to ensure compatibility among the various users allowed in the district and to protect adjacent non-industrial development from potentially incompatible uses and conditions. So we're proposing this to change to light industrial district, and then kind of separate that. Now we want to be clear, while it mentions kind of manufacturing, the intent is light assembly, light packaging type of activities. Nothing, and you'll see when we get to the definition of what we consider to be heavy industrial, it's really those things that need to be contained inside because of odor, noise, the intrusiveness of whatever is being manufactured. We don't want that to escape from the building. People are wearing suits and masks.
If we skip over to Rockwall NC, their industrial, do they call it light industrial? What do they call it?
That's a good question.
Preston, light industrial, what's the connotation for you? What do you think of? Do you think of these projects?
Yeah, they do. Spec projects.
how about you?
Yeah. I guess my fear is
I think of Detroit when I think of heavy manufacturing.
Well,
Exactly.
I even think of Garland where you go down.
That's true.
You go down
That's
with
true.
Miller, there's some heavy industrial, there's Sherwin-Williams, there's a lot,
Yeah.
there's some, what I would consider seriously heavy
Right.
industrial, which I don't
Hazmat.
want to hear.
Yeah, hazmat,
Yeah, so.
True.
Well, we have the light at SFA or whatever but it's assembly. They don't,
Right.
they don't pour and tool.
Yeah, yeah,
and tie
that's
and-
right. They're, when I'm talking manufacturing, I'm
Yeah.
talking forging,
Exactly.
pressing,
Exactly.
chemical reaction, paintings,
Yeah.
I used to work for a major international chemical company there that I would consider,
I like that definition. I like technology and research development.
yeah,
That's a use that.
light assembly, distribute, which is really what SA is gonna be, is light assembly.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're heavy pieces, but it's still light
Well, it's,
assembly.
they're assembling
Yeah.
things that's already
Yeah,
manufactured.
yeah, it's manufactured, they're not
Exactly.
forging axles or
Correct.
something.
Well, I hate to plagiarize.
Well, I don't-
So you,
I'm just
so
saying.
you asked for Rockwall, and this is what they have. So they do have a light industrial district for modern industrial land uses, including technology and research and development, office and light manufacturing, light assembly and distribution fields.
I explained that.
So where does pharmaceutical manufacturing come from?
For what it's worth, the majority of Rockwell's a PD.
Right.
Taking those scope, I've been by some down pharmaceutical plants in Kansas City.
Well, no, I think they've done their industrial right.
Right.
No, I'm talking big
No, I'm talking about
chemical, they're basically chemical manufacturing plants.
Yeah. Pharmaceutical manufacturing.
What is that? TJ's? What exactly is that?
That's what, yes, English one.
But if we were to land, and I know they did this, Nokia did this over in, Irving, that they assembled cell phones at one time over there. But, and they're in the same type buildings what we allowed in Lakeview District, we call a warehouse. But that's what they did, they assembled cell phones.
And I would consider that land.
Yeah, to that, I have no problems.
There are some environmental issues there, but.
Yeah. There's one in Allen that's the exact opposite. That looks like a warehouse, and they disassemble cell phones to part out. Yeah.
There are some processes with that call it environmental issues.
Oh, I had an extra here.
Well, and you have that with
Okay,
Recode,
whatever.
which is down in the old industrial area. Because it's a plating company, and with the heavy chemicals, and it is considered heavy chemicals that they have.
See, and even though those are actually fairly physically small spaces, I would still consider that heavy manufacturing. My point being, heavy manufacturing doesn't necessarily mean it's a Ford factory, it can be a small, but yeah, you start getting into those type of,
Where you, especially the chemicals,
yeah.
then I would put that in a heavy category. Because you have heavy metals.
Hazardous materials.
More hazard.
Oh, I should say that because there's a lot of hazardous materials.
Drop your.
Well, yeah. So, anyway, we're,
So how about, this has just come to me, they're not as popular anymore because it seems like we're outsourcing those too. Or maybe they'll come back. Remember at one point, we were putting in call centers in these types of districts, right?
right.
Now, we've outsourced a lot of that now, out of the country, but, is that potentially, an activity, we're gonna potentially have Lincoln Tech, which is kind of a combination of, you have school, but they focus on technology. They focus on the-job training, so they'll be doing some light automotive work, they mentioned
Well, there's automotive, welding,
some healthcare.
electrical,
Electrical, right.
plumbing,
Right.
HVAC.
HVAC.
Well, that's more an educational environment.
Exactly.
I mean, they're not building rooftop AC
No.
units.
No,
for-
but I think for them to go into that sort of place is just great because
Yeah.
it's trades that are being used in the other buildings.
But they do need parking, and the call center, the downside, first of all, they're low-wage jobs. Two, the parking ratio goes from 4-to-1 office to like 10-to-1. So you have to have a lot of parking, and it's low wage. It's not necessarily what you want to
So what, I think my question is,
Correct.
and wait for my education. At what point, okay, like we have the example, right there on Lakeview and going behind
Right.
all that. At what point does the developer, and to who, like, is it to P and Z or just that? Okay, here's what's going to go in here. At what point do we know that?
Depends on the.
Somebody comes in and starts with the lease.
Yeah,
So when they-
and that would end up going to planning development for
Right.
a certificate of occupancy.
Yeah.
So okay, so at the point that we know what's gonna go in, is there any course for P and Z to say, no, we don't want that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Absolutely, if they're changing,
Yeah,
if there's,
is a use table. that
Hold
fits
on,
under-
it depends. If the building's built already, okay, it's not coming to P and Z.
Okay,
It's gonna be,
It's
it's
gonna
gonna
be
be
a
a staff, yeah,
For that.
it would be a staff,
the staff.
Yeah.
so it couldn't even come to council.
right. It potentially could. If we found out that someone was gonna put in a use, and we go to the use table and we see that that use, even if the building is already permitted,
Okay.
that is only permitted through a SUP, special
Then
use
it
permit,
would come to.
then it would come to vote.
Then it would come,
P&Z.
they didn't
Yes.
use that, okay.
So what's gonna happen, and this is kind of why I was leading into this conversation, kind of looking, not necessarily picking on the development, but it is one of interest because it's also, you know, they have a replat that they're gonna be looking at later tonight. But it does make us think through, how could we have done this differently? And maybe try to, and I think from a staff's perspective, we got to not that we didn't drill down, but we have to try to drill down even more when we're getting to this, because spec buildings leave so much to the imagination that we might have to come back before both P and Z and city council, depending upon who's gonna be the end user. And that could create a myriad of issues. Parking, type of use that's being proposed.
And the end user would also have to get a business license,
Yes, exactly,
so they would, yeah,
exactly.
so they would have all that.
It's the CO to open their business. It's a building that's already there. And so they have to go and say, hey, this is what I want to put there.
Right.
And if I'm a heavy industrial company and I want to go move in there, I'm looking for a place that's either zoned heavy industrial or that I think can be rezoned to
Right.
heavy industrial.
for example, I had a certificate of occupancy come in the other day, and they wanted to build a HVAC building, but they wanted to put up, it's basically a dryer unit, looks like a giant silo, but it's 100-foot tall. And I said, there's not a zoning district in Rowlett that allows anything over 90 foot.
Yes, you can dig a hole,
And yeah, if you go in a hole and then,
dig a hole.
yeah. But it pretty much, he said, well, okay, then never mind.
I can-
That's the planning step that comes through. If we run into something, we go through building, fire, planning, and health reviews on every CO. If there's something in there that requires higher level review and approval, then it goes to, planning and zoning for SUP or council for PD.
And not to keep harping on this example, but that's why we also have to be careful about the PD. Because remember, the developer is the one that submits what are the applicable uses. So if they did, for whatever reason, and again, I don't know it as much, if they did for whatever reason have some type of heavy industrial use and it was approved, then they have the right because that's what the PD dictates.
Right.
It overrides basically.
But that use was on our use chart, it was.
Yeah, it was identified at the time the PD was approved.
Right.
Right.
And they anticipate who's going to move in, even if they
Right.
don't know the specific
Yeah.
businesses.
And you know, quite frankly, a lot of time with the spec buildings, they don't know. They know that they have the potential
Yes.
to build, to build something. However, the question is, how much more can we drill down to make sure that they can give us something that's gonna comply, or we're not gonna have to bring it back through a SUP or an amendment to the PD. We had to do an amendment to the PD for North Shore because when they created the PD, they didn't anticipate educational institutions.
It was on there.
It was on there but they were specific about this being a vocational school
They
with their other
wanted
activities.
to have it in there by right.
By right, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah, it's by SUP.
Right.
By SUP.
It was initially done, but they did it, though, right? They initiated
It's by SUP in North Shore, you can have it. They wanted it by right.
Right. No, I'm saying though, they were the ultimate individuals that submitted the PD for consideration.
Right.
Or,
But, and they,
Yeah.
yeah, and they got it. And it was approved, but by SUP.
yes,
So now they came in front of P and Z and
Right.
said, well, we'd like to have it by right.
right, okay. So they still have to come back.
But I think your point here is that you've sort of put a round peg in a square hole,
Correct.
and you've created some issues that are not easily resolved.
Right.
And
Could
if I'm a leasing guy and I'm looking for space, there's a plethora of space to look at that doesn't have these kinds of issues.
Right.
So I'm going to go and lease there because it's easier and it's quicker and it's faster to live.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so when you created this, and if it sits there, what have we created?
Right.
So I think it's incumbent upon us to think about the setbacks.
Right.
To think about what we need as far as parking, what we need as far as turn ratios for trucks and things like that. If you don't do that, you create round pegs and square holes.
Right. This building is being built into an already built environment, right? And so we already know the potential issues that are going to come from it. Truck traffic, we have businesses that are using that drive aisle partially for parking. That's going to conflict when trucks are coming in and out, and people are not going to be getting out.
And I think that the other point, I mean, looking at it, if we're looking at 30,000 feet looking down, and you look at that piece of land and go, well, that's a great use for that piece of land. It's just maybe too big of a, and if I'm the developer, I'm gonna build on every inch I can,
Right.
because every inch of it, you know this,
which is exactly what they did.
is exactly,
Right.
because that's the revenue. They make money off of leasing every inch.
That, yeah,
Right.
that amount of square feet.
Right.
So it's incumbent upon us
Right.
to put in enough ratios to make sure that it is protecting the other users and making sure that it is leasable to a certain extent.
So I'm gonna go back to this zoning considerations, restrict planned developments to get around industrial zoning district design criteria. That's why I put that in there.
Yeah.
There are limited access points. This is already, this area is built on all other sides. And they literally built something that's gonna have potential high traffic coming in and out with very little access. As opposed to when we look at our other industrial development, it has perfect access off a major thoroughfare in the sidewalk.
Off a freeway.
Off a freeway, right. Where you're gonna have
Like six-
least amount of conflicts with the adjacent residents or adjacent property owners, right? Because there are very few residential developments around, and then there are no conflicting commercial establishments. Okay.
Put all the traffic problems.
I just saw that it's a Brahms warehouse.
It could be.
They're always gonna be stocked.
All right, so when we look at the dimensional standards and the setbacks, we provided some general guidance, right? This is for, if you all are comfortable with changing this to limited, what do we call it? Light industrial, thank you, LI. Light industrial from limited manufacturing. This says lot coverage 80%, no minimum width, no minimum depth, no minimum area, and then setbacks are 50 feet from the front side.
So you mentioned that the building height on both of those complexes was 42 feet,
About that. For this one,
correct? And then the other one,
this one is
66.
definitely 42 feet.
so is there a reason that staff recommended 36 feet?
I think we were going with the traditional standard. That's the standard that is currently there.
My thought is how do you get away from them
Yeah.
pushing to a PE? So what can you do? Do you either increase the height or do you go to an additional height with an SUP?
Well, you use the standard. Then let's make it.
For an industrial building, they're typically higher than your one store So,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're dealing cubic feet, not square feet.
right.
Most racking systems in industrial buildings need a 32-foot ceiling height, so they can, to optimize it, so they don't need really specialized forklifts, but most forklifts will go to 32 feet.
And I think all those buildings, am I correct, that there's two sides, there's an incoming and outgoing distribution, that all those buildings have truck docks on both sides?
Yes.
The one that's off of 66 there?
No, here.
Yeah, off of there.
Exactly.
Just
So again, another
The
point.
southernmost one doesn't.
No, all the truck, terminal part is on one side of the building. Now you see, what you can see is a double, because you have two buildings
These are two.
backing up.
Exactly. These are actually two buildings, not one, so.
Yeah, but isn't there distribution?
No.
These are not dock doors?
No,
No.
the dock doors
No.
are to the inside and they face each other.
So everything comes and goes from this side.
Right.
Correct. Yeah,
On that building, yeah.
well, it's all, the dock doors is here and here. So they're interfacing. The dock doors is here, and there is dock doors here, but it's interfacing this one. And there's dock doors here and on the backside of this building. And they're back up to each other. There's no dock doors that'll face, George Bush directly, or the end caps.
But let me ask this question. So, you know, we were looking at the height of this building. Would you be opposed to this being double its height, given
Probably.
its current position?
Yeah, and I don't think I've ever seen one. Yeah, so,
For industrial uses?
right.
Yes, I
So maybe-
would be opposed to it.
So maybe at a minimum, instead of 36 feet, we make this 42, 45 feet?
And I would not be opposed to that, but if you go over to Sunnyvale and you see where Lineage is, the freezing company, they're about 3 stories. They've got an additional thing for
But they would be, I think they would fall under industrial heavy.
It'll be more of a heavy industrial.
This is for the light industrial.
Yeah,
They don't need to include office uses?
Typically, they will have an office component to it,
Yeah.
but what the code says that office uses has to be ancillary to the primary use, which in this case would be industrial, light manufacturing.
I would suggest you look at what the market is and what other industrial properties have as far as height and marketing. Because if you're a distribution company, you know exactly what your racking system is, you know exactly what height you need, you know exactly where the sprinklers are, and whatever that is, and an industrial broker can tell you this, that's what you should have as your requirements. Don't build things that aren't
So what are
fixable.
those? So what are those?
I'm not an industrial broker, so I can't tell you. I can tell you about this.
If you're Frito-Lay, it's 70 feet. If you're Coca-Cola, it's 50 feet. But Frito-Lay's 70-foot warehousing system is completely automated. The building is a machine, and it's not an actual warehouse. So, yeah, Walmart has something similar to it.
Yeah.
You know, just thinking about examples around town, if y'all get down there south of Dallas, they're on Wintergreen,
Yeah.
where the inlet and the whole port down there, and those are 90-foot probably buildings, 100-foot. I mean, they're huge, and they're nowhere in Rowlett or anywhere that I would see that
but
would.
that's the intermodal area.
But that's what I'm talking about, yeah, but just by way of example, that's
Exactly.
completely inappropriate for anything around here.
This looks,
You're looking
this
at.
Yeah.
looks very marketable.
And
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and I agree with you, but that, just for the information, that's the
Yeah,
intermodal.
just throw it up there, exactly.
Yeah. Similar.
So
to
maybe
Arlington.
for argument's sake, instead of saying 36 feet, would you be comfortable with 45 feet?
I am.
Well, again, to Carter's point, is that you were talking about,
Right.
racking systems, I mean, is that what the industry wants? I mean,
So here's the thing.
I used to rent warehouses and, we get caught where, we get this kind of cheap, crappy ones because they had low ceilings and we had to adjust our racking systems to it because we couldn't use full racks, for example.
Right.
So we don't want to build that problem into it when we're doing this right now.
Right. But as a baseline, because that's what we're trying to establish, right? A
Right.
baseline. Would we be, because they always, if they need to go higher, they can always apply for a variance and say, because of the type of equipment we're gonna need to have.
Yeah, because we
We're
don't
gonna
just
have
want
to-
in here.
Yes, we're gonna have to increase the height, right? So that's where that provision comes in. But for a baseline, the previous one was 36 feet. If this was being permitted today, it would have to go PD route because the current zoning district wouldn't allow that.
What did you say the height is on it?
About 45 feet.
45?
42, yeah, 42, 45 feet.
And remember that we want to rate these so we can actually
Correct.
apply them to the most number of places.
Well,
we can.
and then the thought
Maybe
becomes
not control.
balancing things. I mean, you got 36, 42, 45, 36. Is 42, I guess where I kind of net on some of these is to just have them visually manageable. I mean, you're looking at this one monstrosity sitting there behind bronze, which I was involved in that, and that was not what I visualized. This is, you're talking about an intended concept, but sort of over here kicking myself, well, wow, I don't know that, I mean, I voted for it, but I'm not sure that I completely understood
Don't
it.
feel alone.
Okay. Well,
It's only your fault,
but
huh?
I don't want to say you have to idiot proof it. I don't want to say you have to idiot proof it, but you kind of do. I mean, it's just reality. We come on the council. I mean, we're looking for somebody to tell us
What right use of the land? How high was it?
and it is a good use of the land.
That's about
poorly
42.
done,
The
and
one behind Ron, that's,
So how about this?
It looks
Mayor Pro
like
Tem?
Irving and Garland are 45 feet.
okay, and I'm fine with 45 feet. I probably just pointing towards it.
No, but you bring up a good point, and there is a potential solution for that. So if you establish a base of 45, anything above 45, you will require an SUP. So that way, it can then come in, because this could be potentially built by right, right?
Right.
If it's meeting all of the design criteria, the dimensions, and all of that, zoning and all of that. But if the concern is to make sure that we don't have another experience, again, just for the record, I'm not picking on the development behind Ron, but it does kind of stand out, right? We could put in, as a prescriptive measure, anything that exceeds 45 feet would require a SUP.
Yeah.
Right, that's the purpose of the SUP, to come in to kind of review it in context.
I'm all for it.
Would you be open for that?
yes.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a minimum rear yard of 25 feet, and we include that just because we need to have a buffer from any additional public access from the back, and then front 50 feet. You wouldn't want to have these buildings right at, in this case, right at the door of the freeway, right?
Is there any light industrial that's going to be adjacent to residential in the neighborhood?
That's a good question. There is always the possibility someone come in and
There
request.
could be, off of Dexter, but you have the railroad tracks separating.
Yeah.
And in North Shore, you could, because there is some neighborhoods that were built intruding into the North Shore area. So when,
They cross the dam about down the front.
yeah, so you could potentially have that. But that's only on basically one side of the project.
So would we add the same 50 feet if it's adjoining the residential district to the rear?
Sorry, that was a question, right? I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was just pulling this up because someone mentioned Dexon.
Because we have it on the side, it's
Right.
50 feet if it's adjoining the residential district.
So right now, this isn't zoned, just as an example, right now, this isn't zoned.
Opposite side of the street.
Okay.
That's nowhere.
But we could do either side, to be quite honest, but yes. right? So here,
Yeah, keep going down a little farther.
right,
Okay, right there. Because you have residential, you can see that big old house with the SUP for the garage there.
right.
And that industrial right across the street with all the junkyard.
Right, right.
But hey, let's say we get someone ambitious and they get control of this land and they want to change the zoning to industrial, right? If we were to consider that, then we would need to have something in place to make sure that we mitigate the potential impacts. As Christoph always talks about the transition, making sure that we have the appropriate buffers, the design criteria in place so that, because, you know, maybe you put in an industrial building that's 10,000 square feet,
Well,
but then,
I thought there were Lakeview is, I
I bring this up, you know,
that particular side of the street would be outside the realm of, because it's on the north side.
yeah.
True.
that's not
But
right.
that is zoned commercial.
correct, but what if the person came in and requested to change the zone?
They didn't want to rezone.
They can potentially rezone,
Understand that.
right? And so,
But the problem is now you're literally backing up to the homes.
correct. And I'm just saying
So
this to
that's
say,
the case.
you may have an example in the future.
Right.
How do we mitigate those potential impacts if we should get a case?
The way that Irving does it is they manage the height of the structure and the setback
There you
by
go.
saying the height of the structure
Stepping it up,
has to be
stepping down.
1/2 of the distance to the nearest residential
Okay.
unit. So if you want a 40-foot high building, you need to be 80 feet away
There you go. The
from
closest
the closest residence.
Yeah.
And
It's
that is the
dictated by
reason.
the
So
height
you
of
want,
the building.
if you want a 40-foot building, okay, so if you want a 20-foot building, you can be 40 feet away.
And then they set a minimum of
Step up
50,
to-
and then they set a minimum of 50 feet. So it's a minimum of 50 feet or twice the setback.
Right,
I like
I
that.
like them, that's good.
And that's the reason why the industrial overlay has a maximum height of 36 feet. Partly to protect the visibility along Lakeview Parkway, right?
Right, but now,
But-
if you go ahead and create this zoning district and get those characteristics, you could almost then do away with your
Right.
overlay that's obviously been overlooked for how many years?
Since 12.
2012.
That's it.
2012 was
So then you have a
adopted.
base height of 45 feet with an SUP for additional height. And then you just use Irving's language that the height of the structure is 1/2 the shortest distance between the structure and the nearest developed residential district,
Right,
or 50 feet, whichever's greater.
I like it.
So just a quick check. We're good with changing it to light industrial from M1 to L1,
Right.
okay? And then maximum height 45 feet. Anything above requires a SUP for additional consideration for height. No minimum floor area. Setbacks. Minimum front setback 50 feet. And then we have this kind of language, yard adjoining residential districts or intersecting districts, 50 feet, corner lot.
I think that the minimum side, you probably just need to get rid of that adjoining residential district. Pull that because we're gonna make a statement concerning whether it's front, back, middle, side, adjoining. Anything that's adjoining the residential requires to be 1/2 of.
Okay.
Preston, is there any reference to parking?
Now,
I can find out.
we're talking parking, but I was under the impression somewhere that we're no longer, or was it just we're considering no longer mandating the parking? Isn't there something at the state level that said?
Yeah, there was some legislation on that, but I don't know
So,
that it passed.
I didn't-
My only point is, if it's a build-to-suit,
yeah.
I don't know what it
it's,
was.
it's handled. The whoever's lieutenant
Builders.
is gonna tell you what they need.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's spec,
Yeah.
like the round peg and square hole, and there's no parking,
They told us.
Well, yeah, but I think as I recall, maybe I've forgetting a lot of stuff, but the whole thing was that it was primarily warehouse space, and that was,
It was gonna be like,
the design of the parking and everything was with sort of the understanding that small office, primarily warehouse space, to your point, Kyle, whatever it was, that was the actual purpose of it. So you could say it's spec building, but there's kind of a certain extent, you know, sort of purpose built.
yeah,
You know, I mean, these are who our customers are, this is what we're looking for. So, you know, I understand what you're saying, but it is, it has some problems, but I'm not sure the
And the other
parking's
thing
the big
too is that developer who builds this square peg in a round hole, he's the one who's putting his money at stake, so.
Yeah,
Except for you were making the decisions on incentives and other things based on a tenant or based on a project. And if it's not leasable, at some point, if it just becomes blight, it's not a taxable producer, and then you just got a big round hole in a square peg.
Now, fortunately, our ordinance does give some provisions, so they can do a shared parking agreement. So if a property has additional parking, they can enter into an agreement, we can have it recorded where there can be shared parking. And I see that a lot when we see, because if you think about some types of uses, they only have parking based upon certain times of the day, certain days of the week. And so, you know, from a planning perspective, we always try to encourage, you know, neighbors to work together. If there is a need for parking, instead of trying to get a variance, just create a reciprocal parking agreement or shared parking agreement. Our ordinance allows that. It has to be within a certain distance. Now, the point that someone was making, there was some provision at the state where if you were within transit, so the area in downtown Rowlett, for instance, you could potentially look at reducing your parking requirements because there is available.
Which is fine for an office environment.
Yes.
But we're talking, if someone said Miles Electric,
Exactly.
so all their trucks park there at night,
Yes.
and they fill them up with electrical equipment, and then they go out and service their
Correct.
customers today. You've got to account for all those vans
Yes.
on surface parking. And if you don't, then you created, again, an environment where you're limited in who you can lease it to.
That's
I mean, we all think about warehouse, big trucks coming in, unloading them, trucks pull away. Well, somehow that product has to get distributed to retail customers, to wholesale customers, whatever it is. And that's additional trucks and that's additional parking.
yeah, but I would somewhat argue that what you're talking about is sort of a difference between a service center and a warehouse.
Right.
This I would consider warehouse, not service. Service centers have their own whole set of issues that for me personally, sort of different from what we're talking about here.
Okay, so let's quickly jump into what is currently M2. The recommendation is HI for heavy industrial. I'll read the purpose statement.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
before we get into
Yes,
that,
sir.
it is 6:40.
Yes, sir.
So
Maybe you want to stop here.
either you want to move on to just hit it a little bit because
Yes.
the P&Z meeting happens.
Yes.
Okay?
And I think we could probably get it accomplished. I was gonna ask, since we've already set the parameters for light industrial, do we want to continue to keep the same type of standards? It was a recommendation of 36, that's what it currently is. I imagine we want to keep it at 45 with an SUP or anything that's higher. And this just gets into the more intensive types of manufacturing and industrial uses, all to be captured in the inside. Now, oftentimes we see incompatibility issues with travel demand. So those trucks coming in early hours of the day, leaving, late at night, and it becomes an absolute nuisance for nearby residential. Fortunately, many of these types of zoning districts are nowhere near residential.
Well, but that goes to the question, so, I mean, it's kind of like when we were, doing the zoning for skyrises, we're by not having those. I mean, I don't know that just as a general statement that heavy manufacturing is really appropriate. Maybe at North side there. But other than that, I don't know anywhere you would even, that I feel comfortable even having it anywhere in the city as it exists right now.
So we found 2 locations already,
Okay,
north of the dark line
see, I don't know.
and this location here. Now, keep in mind, some of these PDs may also be, the underlying zoning may be M2. So it depends upon the user, what they're trying to do. What I always say is, and this goes back to Christoph's original point, is this is the buffet. What was your term? What did you call it?
Toolbox.
A toolbox, where we want to make sure that we have the availability of different types of zoning districts that will accommodate any type of future development, right? And we don't want to be so restrictive that we just don't have it. We probably, given the fact that we have not a lot of land to develop, we're probably not going to have many of these. And if we do, we'll probably get a development much like what we got for the industrial park on the toll.
Is this Dexon down here?
Yes.
All right, then this is Glico, right?
No, that's one's farther to your.
Yeah, that's the creek.
Maybe that road.
Dexon is,
That's one's to your right, to your right.
keep going, keep
To
going.
your right.
Right.
To your- there you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
This is
that's-
Dexon?
Yes.
yep.
Okay. Well, that's on Kent.
Yeah, that's number one.
Well, then what is this designated?
That's the industrial
That's
overlay.
the industrial overlay.
Okay, all right, well, then that's what Glico is, right?
Right. Those are those small little.
That's probably the heaviest industrial we have.
Yeah, but I would say
Exactly.
that is currently M2 right next to the park, and I mean, that's, I think that's inappropriate.
You think it's what?
Inappropriate.
Why?
I agree.
There's, you got a nursery, you got a PD, which is a nursery,
Mhm.
or a nursery, which is a PD. And then you got
For
Lakeview
heavy,
Parkway.
for what you consider heavy plant. Oh, wait a minute, okay, I'm sorry, I've got my, never mind. Okay, I'm with you.
So again, what's driving this
I'm with
is
you.
should not be close to
That's on,
residential use.
okay,
So not close to residential developments,
I got you.
right?
On the other side of Jackson is residential.
Yeah, those SUPs,
To the right.
yeah, SF40s down there.
Yeah.
But, yeah,
So these are
Right
probably
there.
long-standing,
yeah, but real, what's that?
these are probably long-standing residential uses.
Yes.
No, those have just been
it's
built.
just recent.
Oh,
And they're continuing to build that one in the, anyway, yeah, they've got 2 more going on there.
But most of it is floodplain.
Yeah.
Right.
The whole
Yeah.
left-hand side
Is,
of those
Over half
lots
of
are
Half of each one of those lots is
And then
floodplain.
you have the railroad tracks separating them, so,
We've got the stables there at the south end.
I mean,
So are we okay to adopt the general standards that we have for M1 for M2?
I'd say so.
Well, we just make the distinguishing between the two. One is for heavy industrial, and we will also capture these in our use code, our use table. And then one is for more light industry.
Right.
do you have some restricted language for the CO? In other words,
That's what I was gonna
yeah,
ask.
you,
In terms of like if we're dealing with spec build or not, or,
No, like,
No, wait,
like,
the building's built and I wanna,
Oh, right.
I don't know, we'll blow up car batteries.
that's the
I
tricky
don't know.
part. Certificate of occupancies are a ministerial activity.
okay.
So that's why at the time of land entitlement, we try to get as much information to present to you so you can make an informed decision. But when it comes to building permits, that's all ministerially approved. So those things won't come back unless there is an SUP for the particular type of use that's actually going in. Then that will come back.
Or
I mean, I think-
zoning
I
conflict.
think as far as M2, I don't know if anybody would walk into a spec building and then say, hey, I want to go ahead, recycle batteries, because there's just so many.
That's the one that gets
Specific-
me to mind.
Well, there's specific
Yeah.
requirements and systems that you need to install
Yeah.
that you usually build the building.
Yeah,
So,
I just think you want to be as restricted as you can to protect
without being so restricted that you feel any incentive for something. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
so
so,
could we go ahead,
Yes.
go ahead and say, yeah, we have them two properties zoned that way, but whatever you want to build,
Yeah,
yeah.
requires an SUV.
All
Yes.
I'm good with that.
So that could be a good point too. You could just make any property
and
as
that's
an
industrial
Yeah.
use.
Yeah, I just feel that unless that's really got some guardrails on it, something,
Exactly.
you just kind of like to want to look at it, just, everything was done right, and everybody with good intentions, but you sort of get to the end of it, and you go, oh my goodness, what do we do? I don't want to have that with battery recycling.
Well, let's go for asphalt.
That's
We can find out about that.
Talk about it.
40 years later.
Shingle Mountain,
What?
Shingle Mountain 2.0.
It's life.
I'm sorry,
Are we good?
Yes, so for M2 designation,
I don't know.
any development being proposed in M2 requires an SUV.
Yes.
And we can,
Yeah.
the same.
Same standard.
Yeah, that's on the agreement.
Okay.
I concur.
Okay,
Sounds good.
it is 12 minutes till 7. And anybody got any comments, questions before we adjourn this?
Just one quick announcement,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. The mayor's called a special meeting, a joint meeting between PNC and City Council. And we're gonna give an update on where we have been before we go around.
And that is next Saturday.
Next Tuesday,
Tuesday.
September 30th.
Oh, that's at this time.
6:30.
Because we also got fire station.
At the fire station, yes. We'll send reminders out to everybody.
That'd be good.
Fire station on Strady and right off of Delaware.
No, Dr. Strady. Dr. Strady.
Yeah.
Because there is another fire station on Dallas.
No, it's on Strady.
The other fire station.
6:30.
It's 6:31.
Fire station.
Or say fire station 2, yeah.
Fire station 3.
Oh, and the next meeting, because we got preempted, so I'm gonna request if we can meet on a Wednesday. City council is not meeting on the
This
first
is,
Tuesday
this
of
is,
the month.
this is an alternate Tuesday though. So we don't, we usually, aren't we every other Tuesday?
Right. Second and fourth.
So the joint meeting is right in between them, so we're not
Correct.
preempted.
And then on October 7th, there is National Night Out. So city council is not meeting, but they're gonna meet on the 14th, which would have been your meeting day. So I have to find a different meeting time for P and Z and for.
I have no life, just so.
Okay. Well, I will be at the council from the 3rd of October to the 13th.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, we
What's
may
that?
have.
I'll be out of town. Well, the mission.
So we're probably gonna tackle next institutional use and waterfront before we get into the most difficult and challenging one, which is form-based code. Urban village and new neighborhood.
Just get to the way.
representation.
That shouldn't take long.
Just.
Off with its
I don't
head.
think we get urban
Off with
neighborhood.
its head.
Those are gonna be our mixed use ones. I think we may have done,
Because we did a residential mixed use.
right.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see how.
This is the,
We just do
That's the
orange
scale.
shoes, orange shoes,
this is like the downtown now.
Right.
it's an overlay district.
Under rare.
All right, we are adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Bronze warehouse.
Water intensive.